All right, we're welcoming in our guest now. Today we are joined by the director of the Pro Tour, Jeff Spring. Jeff, so thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. Good to be on. I know we've tried to connect before, and happy to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long time coming, and certainly now is a great time more than ever. So we're here in the wake of obviously some recent big changes in Pro Tour policy, and that's one of the main things we're going to discuss today. But before we hop into that, I just want to ask you, when you signed on as tour director, and times were obviously a lot different then, did you ever foresee that your biggest challenge would come not from growing the sport of disc golf and creating a sustainable tour, but from becoming the spearhead of this battle for competitive fairness?
Absolutely not. I think that this is an emerging topic that hadn't yet ramped up to a level of concern at the place it's at now. So it's certainly become a challenge, but I did know that if we're going to grow the sport into a high level emerging sport, and our vision is to push to the top of the emerging sport pile and kind of make waves and basically the big sports even, because that's our belief that where disc golf can go. I knew that there were going to be a lot of unforeseen challenges. So I just look at, the issues that we deal with, whether it's this one or new ones that pop up, pretty recurringly, as part of the job, part of what we signed up for when we became, kind of the Disc Golf Pro Tour team. That's me and all of our staff, which, we've got a pretty big team now. So.
Yeah, certainly. And it's certainly been a big battle to undertake. So before any of these recent policy changes were made, whether it be the first announcement or this most recent one, obviously the catalyst for them, as cited by the Pro Tour, was multiple legal battles racking up very expensive fees. How desperate was the financial situation for the Pro Tour to warrant immediate changes during the course of the season rather than at the end of it?
Yeah, it certainly was concerning. There was the need to take an unavoidable step to limit, the financial burden. But we want to continue to be an area of growth for disc golf. I think that we've all seen that post-COVID, we've experienced a little bit of a plateau here for the entire industry. And normally the industry is growing between 15 and 25% non-COVID years, depending on the sector, whether it's manufacturing or media, retail sales. That obviously jumped up to like 250, 300% in COVID. And now we've kind of plateaued, and I think it's hard to tell exactly what the growth metrics are right now. We have this huge surge of people. We've kept most of them. We've lost some of them, and the growth continues. New people find out about disc golf all the time. We feel that the Disc Golf Pro Tour can be part of the solution for the next huge phase of growth through media partnerships and just putting disc golf at the professional level in front of more eyeballs. And we want to make sure that core part of our mission is intact. And when we feel that there may be an issue where financially we would have to go backwards or consider more drastic cuts, we need to be financially responsible. So that kind of sums up kind of the position we're in. We can't afford really to see the potential of multiple more cases, potentially at once filed. And, it was just a point in the year where we had to stand back and say, we need to take immediate action. That action created an inflection point, which we're able to bring in a lot of our stakeholders and hear from them, decide, was the plan that we put in place going to be able to be implemented well? Was it going to be effective for our partners, our stakeholders, our players? And that was kind of the conversation since that announcement. But hopefully that gives you a good sense of kind of the financial picture from our perspective.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the burden of creating a sustainable tour for disc golf is already quite an expense, and it's come a long way, but certainly the additional legal expenses would make things difficult. So the first announcement that was made, prior to this one now, the initial policy change, and this was talking about this, there was a lot of uncertainty in it, but it was citing the the issues with finances and basically the Pro Tour events that were going to be considered a potential issue for legal risk were canceled with the hope that they would be rescheduled. And so this policy, when it first was announced, was a lot more abrupt and a lot more harsh, I guess you could say, than the new one that has since come out. Was this policy, why was this policy ever made, this announcement made, if this one that has now been announced ever had potential of following up? And do you regret rushing to that first decision, knowing that there was possibility this next one coming, or was this new one not formed yet at all?
Yeah, I mean, the new one wasn't formed yet really at all. It came out of over 10 days of long talks with a lot of players and partners. And going back to the first one, I mean, the pattern of the legal challenges that we've seen are kind of this last minute tactic to within 10 days of an event or less, to mount a legal challenge, which is not normal order. These aren't necessarily emergency situations, which the TROs that we're facing are supposed to be an emergency injunction. We have had this policy in place since December of last year, and there's plenty of time to bring suit and figure out how to proceed if there is a challenge there. The tactic that's been being used is just one that kind of created a situation where it's necessary and unavoidable to just move forward at that point in time with that announcement. And so we were certainly looking for solutions. I think that long term, potentially this could evolve into a different division potentially, which I think as we go into the off season and look at refinements and creating a solution that's really going to be durable for long term, which this may be. We're hoping that this is. We're working ideally with the PDGA to get that division made in the off season. So, if that's able to happen, I think that's probably best case scenario. But we'll see. In terms of kind of the basically walking back the cancellations and restoring the events. We just found over the course of the 10 days that it was the best case scenario because the inflection point created a moment that we could either go further apart or come together. And I feel that everyone wanted to really come together and have an opportunity to move forward together. And I know this is an incredibly divisive issue. So coming together and listening, learning, watching what happens with the United Series is hopefully going to keep people's minds open, because there are entrenched positions on both sides of this. People that truly believe, for many, many reasons, that they're truly right about what they believe. And I think that just moving forward, where we have the ability to implement both eligibility policies that we've been implementing, means that we could, see people maybe just soften up and just look at what's going on, think about the potential for the future, really understand that respect is the top line here. We got to respect the people involved in this on both sides, respect their opinions, listen to them, take down the rhetoric. So that inflection point really created a path where we could see what happens. Now, coming together, that's what we're trying to do. But we know that the polarized ends of this don't, they don't necessarily see this as a compromise they want, but it is,
Right.
it is for a lot of people a compromise they want. And so, there's a silent majority, I think, on this that understands the situation. And, that's kind of why we had to kind of make kind of these disparate statements. But the first one, we didn't know what would happen after that. We had plans, we had courses, we had a lot of people reaching out saying, come here, come there. But as we got into it and saw another path, we pivoted, listened to the players, and a lot of this was through FBO player feedback.
Yeah. Do you think that if the first if this new plan had been devised sooner and you could have avoided that initial announcement, would this plan have landed easier than it maybe has, especially amongst the fan perception?
Yeah, hard to project, but I don't know. I don't think it would necessarily land any easier. I feel that, we're seeing the reaction, that generally we were hoping for and expected. Is that nobody wins, so everybody's a little unhappy. But there are elements that people can say, I've got something carved out for me that I care about, and I can keep fighting, keep advocating for that point of view. So, and I don't think if we, came to this solution, earlier, that it may have, been understood that this is a necessary compromise for everyone. I think that the path that led us here, was a learning experience for everyone. I mean, we're on the kind of the bleeding edge of this issue in sport. And a lot of what I'd like to do is get off of that bleeding edge and focus on disc golf, move forward with our tour in the sport, where this is obviously still an important and a crucial issue and number one priority for some people. But for the tour, it can't remain the number one priority, constantly. We need to focus on the sport, our great athletes, growing the game, and this can be an important topic that we address. But we believe that, at this point, from our experience, and without that experience, of seeing what's happened, in court, I don't think that we would be informed the same way. I don't think the public would be informed the same way. So it's really hard to project, but I think that we are always led by doing what we think is right. Number one, respect. Number two, in this case, a full tour for the FPO division. And number three, competitive fairness. So I think that, that result of, that we've found now is kind of baked into, the journey that we've had this year. And, I don't know that we would go back and try to do anything differently. We're kind of all moving forward and learning, together on this new issue.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So you mentioned the divisiveness of this issue and just the idea that disc golf is on the leading edge. So I can see how the previous announcement, it certainly came down and surprised a lot of people. It was tough to see if one side was happy and the other wasn't. But you kind of said it too. And with this new announcement and this middle ground, you almost have this scenario now where it feels like neither side is completely happy, but maybe you found a point where both sides are unhappy, but not boiling over unhappy. Is the best compromise in this situation just that, where you have both sides maybe not completely satisfied, but in a place where you can let things get figured out and just keep things stagnant for now?
I think you're right on with that one, Trevor, because the outcome that I think that if you are on the end and maybe entrenched on one side or the other, the outcome that that you have to grapple with right now is that if either end of this fully wins, I don't see a great path to having a full tour for the FPO or a positive outcome for the division, honestly, because it just if you game it out and look at the challenges that would come with that, they're significant on both ends. So this is where we felt we had to lead and say the facts on the ground are clearly pointing to a compromise. And if either side wins, it would be an immense challenge for the division to continue in a productive way with all the elements that we need to make a successful tour, which is, ability to schedule freely in any state, ability to have great partners, ability to, focus on the game and not a bunch of social media rhetoric, ability to make sure that everyone can be included in some way, shape, or form. And I think that this solution is the way that we see things being able to go forward as this broad cultural issue goes to courts that are, big courts, larger sports, international sports, and the weight of this resolution on the disc golf industry. My concern is that if we aren't smart about how we address this, it could have really long-term damaging impacts on the growth of the professional industry. So, this is the path that we feel will give everybody a little bit of, half of what they want, and, continue to be able to advocate for what they believe in.
Yeah. So the Pro Tour, I think one of the heaviest criticisms that has come from the newest announcement is that the Disc Golf Pro Tour has assumed the stance, and you have assumed the stance in previous matters, that you are standing by your policy, that you believe heavily in what you have found with competitive fairness, and that what you had enforced previously was what you believed to be what you thought was fair for the FPO division. Now, since this new announcement, there has been people that have criticized the Pro Tour of essentially walking back or going back and reversing what they had said previously. But then you also mentioned the idea that the Pro Tour is maybe kind of waiting things out, waiting for other sports with more resources to figure this out so that things can be enforced later down the line. So my question is simply, does the Pro Tour still believe in what they have stood by previously with competitive fairness? And if things do get solved in larger courts and with larger resources down the line, will the Pro Tour still stand by those policies and enact them as soon as possible?
Yeah, we do stand by our belief that the gender eligibility policy as applied at C3 is necessary to ensure competitive fairness at this time. We're doing further scientific study. We're commissioning, more research to be done. And without getting into the nuts and the bolts of, peer-reviewed scientific research, I'll just point to other organizations that are also sharing, the policy that we have that are bigger than us. World Athletics, World Aquatics. Just recently, the day we, kind of announced the relocation of events, UCI, which is the International Governing Association of Cycling, announced that they were, adopting kind of on an emergency basis the same policy that we've applied so far this year. So, in international sporting, I think that there's precedent being set that this is, if you don't have this policy in place, that it's a risk to the female category of sport in general. Now, we have to square that up with the results that we've seen in California and Minnesota so far. And, our organization will respect, state laws. And I think that when we made our first announcement saying, hey, we can't proceed, so right now we're going to cancel and relocate, it was born of that, like a recognition that, if we're seeing similar liability to those two states in other states, then, why, bang our head against the wall, even if the larger organizations that I mentioned in sporting, like those larger organizations, by the way, are handing out over half the medals in the Summer Olympics for the IOC. And this is all kind of started when the IOC put out a new framework, and it's caused a lot of challenges across these sports, right? But even if these sports and the big Olympic sports are having the same policy that we have to reconcile that difference with state law. And the first announcement was trying to do that and saying, like, hey, if we expect to get similar results. And let me just stop right there and say, like, none of these have gone to trial yet. So, like, we'll see how they progress. We believe that the public accommodation law in Minnesota has a sports exception that does say that you can create a female division, basically. But that seemed to not really be part of the initial ruling. We feel like it will be part of the full ruling, and we'll see. But at the bottom line is we're going to respect the state courts, judges' decisions. And if we feel that that's going to be, something that we have as a liability going forward, we need to make a change. Now, part of that change is, we could either go further apart by saying, we are going to look down the road at 2024 and reorganize the entire tour. That was the kind of big talking point, if that makes sense, Trevor, like between, us and the FPO players is like, we're talking about the heart of the FPO Tour, the heart of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. We'd be basically ripping the heart out of the schedule for the FPO Tour next year if we proceeded with the relocation strategy. So, I don't think that it was viable. And what that informed is a change to, and this is kind of back to the other question, like, why did this change? Well, we looked ahead and said, what if we keep doing this? Wasn't palatable. It really wasn't palatable, and it wasn't fair to the FPO competitors. So we said, hey, listen, instead of going that route, pulling things further apart, risking, more, let's move forward together. Because at the end of the day, and this is getting to your other part of the question here, which is, whether we will continue to follow this. I really think that in sports, the solution hasn't been found yet. I believe that transgender women should have a viable division to play in, should have a full field, and should even have opportunities at times to play with females as well. However, I do believe that the female division needs to be protected, the female category as well. And I think that we're going to watch and wait and learn from this and see what kind of solution comes out of it, because, we're not changing our stance on competitive fairness. And the only thing that would do that is if we continue to look at the science and there seems to be a clear way to ensure competitive fairness, right? That's not apparent currently. And I feel that, that said, we spent 2 years before this, putting out community guidelines, protecting trans women from harassment on site and online, and celebrating their accomplishments equally. We are an inclusive organization. We don't believe in discrimination. We, really object any of the social media comments or any hateful language. Our community guidelines, we feel, are very progressive. I'm from Vermont. I'm a progressive-minded person. I believe that, equality is very important. These are core values to our organization, and no one is trying to, do anything but, respect and create opportunities, for everyone. We're in a transition period. I think people need to understand that, not just for disc golf, but for all of sport. Our solution right now is fairly unique, and I think that we'll learn from it, and we need to learn and listen. But, back to that second part of your question, we do need to preserve space and competitive fairness for the female category in disc golf, and that's something that we are dedicated to. We're going to see how it evolves, and beyond that, I can't predict the future. I think that we're open to listening, learning, creating space, protecting trans women, and making sure that they're celebrated equally. And in these events, the policy provides that everyone eligible is playing on that eligibility requirement. It's a fair playing field, and I would say to your audience, any audience, that the eligibility requirements now at United Series events allow for trans women to play. They should be able to play, be celebrated equally, and be free of any harassment, hate, or bigotry. That's our stance. That's what we've done for 2 years before this policy change. And I think that it's really important not to go to the edges, the polarized edges, and let the silent majority, who I believe shares this opinion, kind of speak up and say, listen, let's take the temperature down, let's move forward reasonably. We can all coexist together. We all have some protected space, and let's just move forward. That's the whole thrust behind the United Series.
Yeah, so you mentioned the eligibility criteria for the United Series, and I was wondering, how did the Pro Tour arrive at the decision? So obviously, the decision made was that one of the 3 criteria outlined in the PDGA's eligibility policy would need to be met to compete in that series. What was the decision-making process to arrive at that 1 out of 3?
Well, It's actually C1, C2, or C3. And if folks want to go online to the PDGA's gender eligibility policy, they can read a little bit more about the details of each of those. Our policy throughout this season has been that you need to meet the criteria in C3 of that policy now, which
Mhm.
does allow for transgender competition. So it's not a ban on transgender competition at all. You just need to transition before the effects of male puberty. And the other two, C2 and C1 of the policy, are less strict. So we're basically allowing more participation of transgender women in FPO if we're allowing C2 and C1.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So the one thing I wanted to ask about was with these decisions, obviously the FPO division and the entire FPO field is being affected greatly by these. We have a large FPO traveling tour at this point, and in the first decision, we saw certain players voice their support. This new decision, the press release features quotes from many of the top players. My question is how deeply involved are the FPO players, and how much have they been involved in these decisions? Has there been meetings with them? How many of them have been reached out to? How big of a part did that play in this new policy?
Well, the first announcement, there was no warning. It was confidential. We felt there was high liability. We had to make the announcement. The second announcement, again, we spent 10 days in continual meetings with folks represented on both ends of the issue. And I don't think that it's a secret that different players in the FPO division have different takes on this issue. So, there's folks that believe that we should operate at C1, 2, and 3 consistently, and there's folks that believe that we should operate at C3, with an eye to competitive fairness consistently. What I found after basically, I feel like our administration, my position's in a unique spot because we take in all the information, from our stakeholders, the players, our business, health, and so basically we were able to share transparently, giving all that information to the FPO players. They basically all, on both ends, arrived at the same conclusion that we were arriving at, which is the United Series is a way to move forward, not just to enable the restoration of these events, but as a potential durable long-term solution where not everybody's happy. We could look at it glass half full, glass half empty, but if we look at it glass half full, we can also hopefully tamp down the division on this, and it was kind of like co-created in a lot of ways. We had a couple options on the table, and it felt like both ends of the issue said this is the way forward. And obviously some folks, if the situation wasn't what it was, some folks wish that we could continue with the policy as it was. Some folks wish we could revert entirely. But I think that this solution allows for a future, and hopefully, I know not everyone maybe will rally around it, but I think the majority of people will rally around this, and come together and move forward, and that's our hope.
Yeah, so along with the FPO division, and you mentioned stakeholders and other people involved in a decision, the Pro Tour is the official touring, it's the official Pro Tour of the PDGA. That's listed at the top of the press release. That's very much a part of the Pro Tour's identity right now. With that relationship, how much say does the PDGA have in this? Are they a big part of these decisions as well? Seeing that their policy is being used in reference, and how much does that become a part of the solution?
Yeah, we're different organizations. We make different decisions, but certainly need to confer with each other on from time to time, especially regarding rules. Not just eligibility policy, but the PDGA is the governing body of the sport, and they have created the gender eligibility rules that we're working within. And we've certainly conferred with them, letting them know what our steps were going to be on this. And that said, we have to make the right decisions for our organization. So, and they have to make the right
Yeah.
ones for theirs.
Yeah, certainly. So Jeff, obviously, with all this going on, a ton of tough decisions have been made. A lot of decisions that have shocked people, upset some people. As the director of the Pro Tour, and as this is going to move forward, what is just the one statement you would say to all the fans who are kind of in a bit of unrest right now, not really sure what the future of the sport is going to look like or what the Pro Tour is hoping to accomplish? What would you say to all those fans right now who are just kind of confused and a little bit in unrest or maybe unhappy?
I would have to say, let's get back to disc golf. Let's focus on the sport. Let's focus on the great athletes. We've been able to restore these events to their original locations. We've got a great schedule coming up. And wherever you fall on this issue, realize it's bigger than the sport. Advocate for it in your state legislature, whatever you believe in, because that's where it's going to be decided. We cannot override state courts. We're going to respect state laws. So advocate. You can continue to advocate and believe, but know that if you bring this issue fully into disc golf, it's a separate issue than just disc golf, right? It goes bigger. So let's get back to disc golf. Understand that this issue transcends the sport, that it will be continual, and that we can choose to. Now that we have a path forward, we can choose to say, you know what? Don't agree with the United Series, but you know what? I can support the FBO players here. I can support, the athletes that I like. And I know that there's, events that have the version of the policy that I believe in. Or you could say, hey, I really don't think that, I think the United Series should be spread across the country, and I want to advocate for that. People can continue to do that, but they still have parts of what they want, they believe in, and that's going to allow everybody to just focus on disc golf, move forward together. Most of us, some people maybe on the polarized ends won't. So I know you said one message, but that's the background of my one message is let's get back to disc golf, and let this be that bigger issue that it is societally. Go outside of disc golf and fight about it, which is happening. And, we'll do our best as a Pro Tour to create outcomes that allow us to focus on the game as well, knowing that we're going to follow our core values, which we believe can be applied to both ends of this conversation equally.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Well, and at Foundation, we can definitely agree with this within this entire situation. We certainly don't like seeing people going up against each other, getting ugly. The personal attacks. That's something that we definitely don't want to see. And hopefully, things will play out on a bigger stage. Hopefully, and then we can move forward with that. But anyways, Jeff, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you joining the show and kind of clearing some things up and speaking to the audience and giving them a little insight into all your decision making as of late.
Yeah, super happy to be able to join your show and speak to your audience, and hope to come back and talk about some more stuff soon.